Thank you very much, Christy, and welcome to our webinar, using game design and coding to engage students. So today we're going to talk about how game design is used in a learning environment to teach coding, and more specifically, how GameMaker approaches this. So here's the agenda for today. We'll look at how GameMaker is taught at grades 7 to 12. It's also used for teaching at both college and university as an art medium due to its simplicity and speed of prototyping. We have some feedback from 150 teachers who use GameMaker in the classroom. We're going to look at how it's taught and the views of those educators. There'll be a brief overview of what GameMaker is, and then we'll get into looking at our educator resources in a fair bit of detail. I'm then going to show you GameMaker by looking at a demo game, and we'll then have a discussion about licensing and our approach to privacy. And finally, as a thank you to making it all the way to the end, we are going to show you how to get your free license and free educational content, and also we'll have the Q&A that Chrissy just mentioned. So, teaching code with fun and game design. In this section, we'll explore teaching using game design. Last year, I sent out a questionnaire to our teachers, the teachers that use GameMaker, and I received 150 responses. I always thought that game design would be proven to be a great way to teach coding, but I was actually surprised that this came through as one of the most important factors. So you can see the chart which shows the semantic scaling response to the question, how effective are game design lessons at teaching the following? So looking at the top performing elements based on their ratings of performing somewhat effective or better, we have learning engagement at 94.6% of respondents saying its effectiveness is somewhat effective or better. Individual confidence at 94%. Planning, teaching planning at 91.4%. Improving the teacher-student bond at 90.6%. Programming languages at 89.3%. And really importantly, class behavior at 86.7%. And here's how our teachers approach the teaching of game design. We're going to look at the teacher resources that we've created for you to use free of charge that cover the first 4 approaches. So, namely making a game step by step using video and with the teacher leading, setting a project with objectives, and class discussion. For those of you with a statistical eye, the y-axis is the number of responses. So from 150 respondents, you can see that multiple approaches are often taken. This chart shows how teachers evaluate the progress being made by students. So our free tutorials include fully documented teacher and peer evaluation criteria, and all 5 approaches are going to be supported in those and fully briefed in those materials. So more on that soon. But before that, though, I think one of the things that's more important than the numbers is actually the context of the responses that we have. So when running the survey, we got some great feedback from educators on how using game design has aided the education process at their school. So we asked them how it helped within their school, and these are the responses that we got. The kids are happier in class. There aren't behavior problems like in other classes. Games require creatives and tech teams to work together with a common goal to solve. While they build games, they also build friendships, learn to overcome hardships, and create something meaningful. My students very much enjoy the game design units that I teach. Personally, I think that game design is effective at improving problem solving, attention to detail, and teamwork. The students have learned to solve complex or abstract problems by themselves. The content provides a sufficient challenge and helps develop persistence and attention to detail. It has certainly enabled some students who are otherwise disengaged from the curriculum to re-engage. And there's a link at the bottom there which you'll be able to click on when Christy sends around the slides, and that will take you to an article that we did in Ed Technology, which includes these quotes. Will actually include some of the teachers that agreed to have their names put to these quotes as well, and provide you more detail of that article and the research that we did. So what about the students? What do they get out of it, and what do they enjoy most? So this was a question we put to the teachers, and this is what they said. Definitely the end where they finally tried their own game, even if it was the most simple game in the world. Learning to overcome challenges and have a working program. The students love to show their parents what they've made by themselves. They are very proud if they get ideas done and improve their skills. The feeling of accomplishment when completing a game and watching others play the games that they built. Just being able to create an original game, then watch their peers play the game is such a high for these kids. To be able to say, I made that, is a real ego boost. Creating games, making rapid progress in a short span of time. Thinking up new games, brainstorming is normally a pain to get students to do, but not when it involves game design. And finally, seeing their ideas take shape. So before we get to the Educator Resources, I'd like to provide a brief overview of GameMaker Studio 2. So it was first developed in 1999 for use in education by Professor Mark Overmars. We recently celebrated our 20th anniversary of GameMaker back in November of last year, and we are on our 9th iteration, which was a complete rebuild. It's won the Developer Award for Design and Creativity Tool, and this year it was nominated as a finalist for the 2020 Pocket Game and Mobile Game Awards Best Game Engine. It's an easy to use 2D game making tool. Being 2D is important because it removes much of the complexity. Drag and drop system for a no-code development. So students firstly understand the fundamental building blocks and can progress to pure coding when they're ready, letting them progress seamlessly without hitting a wall. Custom language, GML. This JavaScript-like language is based on C and designed to be easy to use for game design and simple to pick up. Free teacher resources, which will be coming right up, and a marketplace where teachers can download free and paid assets, tutorials, and demos, which are complete game projects to investigate and modify. These aren't necessary because everything you need is in the Educator Materials, but there's also a lot of free stuff on the marketplace which can help you to make your games and make them look better. We've got a large active community. There's a very active forum, social media. We also have regular tips from the pros. So from our studios, they provide tech blogs. There's a large active community with big studio credibility. So students can see hundreds of real games with many multi-million seller games made with GameMaker. The link on here takes you to our showcase with award-winning games. The iPad Game of the Year for 2019 was Hyperlight Drifter, which was made with GameMaker. And finally, we have over 1,000 new users every single day, with 90% of them being beginners. So while we are a professional tool, we are at the same time a foundation tool. So here it is, our Educator Materials. We have a full teaching program which is available free to download on our website. It will take the teacher and the student through teaching and learning coding, as well as using those skills to make and extend a game that we've called Space Bubbles. So in this game, you pilot your craft, you avoid and pop bubbles and split rocks with your gamma beam as you race to the warp gate to get home. The link to the materials is at the bottom of the screen here, and it will be sent out to you by Christy. And here's a list of everything that's included in the materials. Space Bubbles is a project-based scheme of work where students work on one project over the course of 8 lessons. Over those lessons, students are taught how to program by recreating their own version of the game. It's aimed at children aged 12 to 16, but can be used for older and younger children. And it's been developed by Terry Watt, who is a teacher and formerly a game designer. So students will learn through a combination of teacher presentations, explanations, and demonstrations. There's written tasks, homework tasks, and practical programming tasks. Students work through 3 categories of tasks during the project. Firstly, all students work through the tutorials to build up a core version of the game. And during those tutorials, they'll be learning how to use the Game Maker software, learning the fundamentals of coding. The scheme of work comes with both video and written versions of the tutorials. It is highly recommended that the students use the video tutorials, as there's a lot more detail in the voiceover from the instructor. But if that's not possible, then there are written versions of the tutorials that they can use in their place. The videos are provided as video files, so you don't need to go online to be able to access them. After completing the tutorials, students demonstrate their learning by extending their own game through a series of extension tasks, and those can be completed in any order. The students then further build upon their learning by completing the challenge tasks, and these tasks ask students to add further features to their game using the knowledge gained through the tutorials and the extension tasks. So, the Educator Resources, these are the 8 lessons. Each lesson comes with a PowerPoint presentation that the teacher uses to guide the learners through the lesson. And there's also a detailed guide for the teacher for them on how to deliver each lesson. The written tasks, there's a pre-prepared workbook that comes with this scheme of work. And this should be printed out as a booklet and given to each student at the start of the project. The students will use this booklet to record key terms and key information during the lessons. The lessons accompany the step-by-step tutorials to help the student to understand the theory behind their work in building space bubbles. So looking at the list of what's covered, there's an introduction. Number 1 is an introduction including terminology. Number 2 looks at the fundamental building blocks of programming. 3, sequencing is about ordering actions. 4, selection statements, which are used to select which code is run under what circumstances. Number 5 starts the self-assessment process. 6 goes into iteration and the repeating of sequences of code efficiently. Number 7 introduces the peer review, where classmates evaluate each other's game, and the last one includes the teacher assessment. So this grid here is the self-review, peer review, and teacher review schema that's used throughout the project. And you can see from here that it actually details the curriculum achievements that will be covered as well. The workbook contains the assessment grids that the students use to self and peer assess their games during the project. As I mentioned, the final assessment grid is for the teacher to use in the last lesson to perform the final grading of the students' work. There are 3 homework tasks that students are issued with at the start of lessons 1, 3, and 5. And these are to be printed out and completed by the students and then returned to be peer marked at the start of the next lesson. It's important to state that none of these require the use of Game Maker at home. Specifically, the 3 homeworks will cover number 1 being mixing and matching, which is the one shown in the graphic, where you match the terms covered in the lesson to the description. Number 2 looks at the sequences required to make a hot chocolate. Number 3 applies selection statements to the hot chocolate making sequence as if you were instructing a robot to make that chocolate. And then you apply this to figuring out what's happening in the Game Maker examples that are provided in the workbook. These are the tutorials that students follow at their own pace to make the game. There's a printed guide and step-by-step video tutorials along with a started Game Maker project and a project for each tutorial, so you can see what you need to achieve. So you'll receive the starter project for each tutorial, an executable of the game, so you can actually play the game through each tutorial, so it will show you what it's going to look like. There's the video tutorial and the PDF tutorials. So I'm going to play the game shortly, so the contents of the tutorials will become self-evident. But there's rooms, there's players, gamma rays, bubbles, collisions, and controlling those collisions, and also the creation of the warp gate. These are the extension tasks that the student moves on to after completing the initial 6 tutorials. Of those that are less obvious, we have wrapping the player, which is moving outside the room on the right and reappearing on the left, or vice versa. Target bubbles, which moves to the player's initial position. Seeker bubbles that change to the player's X coordinate as they move. Chase bubbles that will follow you around the screen. And we've got side bubbles that that come in from the side rather than from the top, and they have all various characteristics. And these are the challenges for the more advanced students. So we've got pop effects, scoring, players' lives, bubble health, and various adjustments to the asteroids as well. So I'm going to go and play the game now. If you just bear with me, we'll get, here we go. So you can see straight away that we've got rocks there. Here are my gamma beams. We've got some particles as things are, just been got. We've got particles as things collide. There's more bubbles. We've got some power-ups there. I'll see if I can get a power-up. I can avoid him. Extra lives. We've got lots of different types of bubbles, and you can see the rocks when they collide with each other, they split apart. We've got lives at the top. We've got some bubbles coming here which have multiple lives which need to be hit more than once with the gamma beam, or we've just got a really interesting power up with the gamma beam. You can see the distance to the warp gate going down, and you can see that my score is going up very slowly. So we haven't got too much further to get to the warp gate, and I've got lots of lives left, so we'll see if we can manage that. Gamma ray update is always going to help. So it's quite a fun game to play, and we're getting closer now, so hopefully we should see the warp gate coming into view shortly. Oh, and this is wrapping round from the left to the right, if you do try that again. And here we have the warp gate. Oh, I'm just going to make a run for it now. And I've escaped. Yay. So that's the game that the kids will be making. So just to move back to the presentation. So you may also like to investigate some of our other learning resources that are on our site or elsewhere on the internet. We've got a breakthrough video tutorial. So I'm going to demonstrate something very similar to this. The breakthrough one that we've got here is a beginner tutorial. I'm going to show you the demo of breakthrough in Game Maker, which is a more advanced version of this, but it's useful for showing the functionality of Game Maker. We've got blog articles from game developers listed there. We've got my first game. You'll notice that some of these are, say, GML and D&D. So some of them are Game Maker language and some are drag and drop. So you can start making a game with drag and drop, and then you can try again with GML, and that's a great way of being able to move from drag and drop onto where you're programming using the fundamentals of programming, but then going into just raw coding. We've got blog articles both from game developers and from our own team. So there's one listed here about explaining blend modes. And we have a Yo-Yo Game support desk, which is available online and gives top priority to education support requests. And there's also first line support in the US available from Studica. So time to get the popcorn out. We've got a video coming up. This is a short video which we made to highlight drag and drop. This is the most common starting point and the basis for learning materials. Off we go. So drag and drop is GameMaker's simplified programming model. Using a simple node network to represent blocks of programmatic logic. We include built-in code completion to aid construction so that it's easier to make logic. The editor supports common idioms such as cut, copy, and paste. There's a toolbox of easy-to-use commands that support common game programming requirements. There's customizable favorites. There's full screen editing to maximize the logic surface, supporting drag and drop scripts along with the event logic. The GameMaker Studio 2 environment allows for the user to customize the environment and layout, allowing for UI to be scaled. There's multiple columns with an overview that outlines the code to view larger scripts. And then finally, drag and drop can be converted directly into GML code, allowing students to see how the GML code once they're familiar with drag and drop. Okay, so just bear with me a minute whilst I'm going to do a demonstration of GameMaker. I'll just bring it up. And bring it over. Here we go. Hope you can all see that. So there's a few things to point out here. We've got tutorials. So these tutorials are all available, can be downloaded. What's really useful for teachers when they get started is to run through these IDE basics tutorials. So this shows you all around GameMaker and will give you a really thorough briefing on all the tools that we have within the product. And we've also got a number of other tutorials within there. What we're going to look at today, though, is demos. So a demo is a whole functioning game which you can go into and understand how that game's made by going through looking at the code, looking at how the drag and drop sequences are put together. So we've got several of those there that you can take a look at. It's probably not the best starting place. Best starting place is to look at the IDE basics tutorials, then to start making some of the beginner simple games. And then once you've got an understanding of the structure of GameMaker and how to make games, then going and having a look at how these simple games are made is a great way to start. So we're going to go and have a look at the Brick Breaker drag and drop, and here's one that I made earlier. Oh, you might also notice coming along the top here, there's some banners which point you through to various resources that you can access. So we've got a nice, clean, empty workspace here. We have the resource tree, which is for navigating around the game's elements. So everything that's required to make the game work is accessible through the resource tree. And so starting here, looking at the sprites at the top, these are the graphical elements within the game. So you can see, actually, one of the things I think I'll do is I'll actually run the game first, and then we can see what we're talking about. So I'll just run the game within the IDE. There we go. So I'm going to just run the game within the IDE and now have a quick chat about what we've got within this game. So this game is actually controlled using the mouse. I'm going to fire to start. So you can see at the bottom we have the bat at the bottom here, which I'm moving left to right with my mouse. There's a room, so the whole thing here is a room, and you can see the bricks here are all drawn as tiles, and we'll look at that in a sec. I'm going to click to start, and then you can see the ball moving. So the ball moves automatically, and the bat is controlled using a mouse. So the ball destroys the bricks, and it disappears when it leaves the room. There's some power-ups in here, which I need to be able to play this for a few seconds, and we'll start to see some of these power-ups coming, and then there we go. So you can see some of those rotating power-ups. We'll have a quick look at those. You'll notice at the top we've got a score, and we've got the number of lives, which isn't very many because I'm not very good at this game. And I've lost already. I'm told that there are other levels, but I've never managed to get out of the first one, so I'll have to take people's word for that. So that may actually look quite simple, but it's actually quite a complex game to put together. So don't be put off when you have a look at some of the way this is structured. This is much more complex than the games that you'll be starting off on, and certainly much more complex than Space Bubbles. So I've created a workspace. I'm just going to close that down, and we're going to have a look at the ball. It's a good place to start. So actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a look. Change my mind. I'm going to have a look at the pickup score. So here we go. So you can see here that we've got an animation going on here, and I'll just pause that. And you can go in. So we've got editor in here, and you can go in and you can edit each one of these. I'll just, apply my fine brush strokes. There are loads of tools around here that you can use to make these look better. So this is the image editor, and then you can set up your animations along the top here. So I'll just create a new workspace, and we'll have a look at the objects. So here we have the ball object. So this is where we have drag and drop, and we've got all of the tools that go towards making drag and drop. That you drag and drop and then add some adjustments to the parameters within those to make them work and make them function. We have these are the events. So there's three events mainly associated with the ball. There's the creation of the ball. There's the step event, which takes you through all of the sort of movement, setting up the movement of the ball and how it rebounds and what it does. And then we have this, which is destroys the instance. So when it goes outside the room, then the ball is no more. So those are the events. We have inheritance, parent and child inheritance, which can speed up the making of the game by assigning characteristics to new objects. And we've got some physics, so we can add some realism in there with the collisions and also some gravity and friction and other things like that. So we'll just make another workspace, have a quick look at the bat. So here's the bat, and just to have a quick look at the events here, we've got quite a few more events. So there's the creation of the bat. One of the things just to point out is that we've got all of these drag and drop items associated with the event. When you actually go to make the game step by step, each one of these will be explained step by step, so you'll fully understand how these fit together and when you use them. So it can be a little bit daunting as a complete beginner, but it soon becomes clear once you're going through the tutorials. So we've got cleaning up, which apparently happens at the end of the first level, but as I say, I've never seen that. We've got alarms which set things to happen at certain times. The drawing is when you actually create the bat, and the GUI is things like the score. So that's related to the score, and that's related to the collisions that happen with the bat. Yeah, we've got some. Here's the mouse, so a little image of the mouse, which shows that that the controls, the user controls are set up, and then we've got some interactions there with the ball and the various items that have the collisions. So you can convert the drag and drop actions to scripts. So I'm just going to show you that now. Look at the live preview. And so these are the events that are being put together using drag and drop, and this is the script which is associated with those. There's also a visual debugger. Just go and create another workspace. So there's a visual debugger that reports live on the game as you play it. So you can see if there's any problems and where they might lie, and it points to where there might be some problems with the code. And finally, you've got export options. So I'll just go up here. It shows the targets that are available. So I'm just using a consumer desktop license here. And you can see my target there is Windows. And then we go and click on this button here to create the executable. And somewhere it gives me the option. It gives me the option to either create it as an executable or a zipped package. Good, okay, so that's that. And I'll just move back to the presentation. Moving on to look at classroom licensing options. So there's two types of license available, and these can be purchased through Studica. So there's the Educator license, which is a desktop export, that exports to Windows, Mac, or Linux, as we just saw. And there's also an Achiever license, which exports to desktop, but also to mobile, so iOS, Android, and Amazon Fire, and all devices associated with those platforms. Includes web, HTML5, and also UWP, which is Universal Windows Platform. And that, interestingly, lets you actually put a game on an Xbox One through the Microsoft Creators Program. So there's 1 year and 2 year options, and the seats are concurrent use licenses, so they can be used for multiple classes. So generally you have one license per machine that you're using. You don't have one license per student, just per machine, and then you can have multiple students using each machine. Which brings me on to privacy. The teacher acts as a seat manager, and they receive a perpetual Educator desktop seat that they can use to investigate and set up the class. The seats are entirely anonymous, including the usernames and passwords, which are randomly generated, so there's no personal information collected at all. There is more information in our privacy policy, and there's a specific section about how it applies to education. So if you click on that link, you'll see the education section. The education section is slightly different because we have seats for education. We don't use those in consumer in our consumer licenses. So so the education side of things is, as I say, completely anonymous. And congratulations, you've made it to the end. So as a thank you for attending our webinar, you'll be eligible to receive a free license, and Christy will send you the link, or when you receive the slides, you just click the button that we have here, and it will provide you with step-by-step instructions. So all that remains is to hand back over to Christy just now and see if there are any questions.
Hi, Andrew. We do have just a few questions. The first one is, all of the desktop machines at our schools are currently Apple iMacs. Looking at the system requirements, it seems like the program is designed for Windows. Will GMS2 run on an Apple computer, or will we need Windows machines for this program?
Yes, I should have mentioned that. That's a really good point. It works on Windows and it works on Mac.
Perfect. And then just as a teacher, what support materials would you recommend to help me get up to speed?
So I would start with the IDE Basics tutorials within GameMaker. I'd also have a look at some of we've got a page which is yoyogames.com/learn. And that's our Learn page, and it's a portal which will take you through to loads of resources. There's written tutorials, but I would start with the beginner tutorials. So we've got 2 beginner tutorials, which are Space Drops, which is actually very similar to Space Bubbles, and we've also got Breakthrough, which is the Brick Breaker. So once you've gone through those in drag and drop, and then gone through to GML, you'll be in a pretty good place. There's a slightly more advanced intermediate platform game which we've created as well, which will give you some really interesting skills. There's also some good places outside of GameMaker that you can go and look at. There's YouTube. We've got loads of people who just create loads of tutorials and videos, and a lot of them are aimed at beginners. There's also Udemy and Pact. They all provide courses, and those can be as little as $9.99. Some of those. So for getting the teacher up to speed, those can be ideal. We've also got a fully documented handbook. And there's loads of support materials as well. So if you click on the support section of the Yo-Yo Games website, then you'll see loads of articles in there, and also on the blog. So I mentioned that we have our studios, when they come to release games, they'll quite often write us a blog about some of the functionality in the game that they're about to release, and so you can go and replicate that functionality in your game. But that's probably something a little bit further down the line once you've become a bit more capable of using the product.
Okay, thank you. And then it looks like there's another question. I only have my classes for 9 to 12 weeks. Will 6th graders be able to get through the lessons and create a game in that time frame?
Yeah, so the lesson plan that we have for Space Bubbles is 8 one-hour lessons. So that should fit quite nicely. I would expect that students would probably take a little bit longer than that to certainly to get to the end of the advanced elements of making the game, but they would certainly get the core game together, and maybe have gone on to some of the extension tasks within 9 to 12 weeks. So very quickly, I think one of the good things about the way that Terry has structured these materials is that you've got people moving things around really quickly, so you can get some really quick wins from it. So it should engage the kids early on, and start to get their creative juices running. But 9 to 12 weeks would be absolutely fine.
Perfect. So I think that's the end of the questions. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank you, Andrew.
Well, thank you.
We all know that GameMaker engages students is an excellent tool for teaching code and other STEM-related topics. So if you would like more information or to request a quote, you can contact us at Studica. You can reach us at info@studica.com or call 888-561-7521. And just a reminder that I am recording this webinar, so I will be sending you an email in a few days with a link to the recording and other information that Andrew mentioned. So if you do have any other questions, you can just respond to that as well. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy your day.